Now, turning to our program, please welcome Preston Cole, Director of the City of Milwaukee's Department of Administration, to introduce today's speaker.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's another great day here in the City of Milwaukee. And I'd like to give a shout out and thanks to our partners at TMJ4. You folks continue to shine a bright light on traffic safety issues, and we thank you for the work that you're doing. And certainly the Rotary. It was, 2 weeks ago when we had folks in from the Medical College of Wisconsin talking about the absolute trauma that goes on in our community around violence and the use of guns. And it's been a tough week for the mayor and the common council as a 4-year-old only days ago lost their life in yet another traffic safety debacle. We all drive probably way too fast. And this is just another opportunity to hear from thought leaders within the Johnson administration to talk about plans going forward. And if you saw the mayor's discussion on television, I've never heard him say a 4-letter word on TV. He was pissed, without question, and rightly so. So we have to organize ourselves and are organizing ourselves to hire the best and the brightest. And I'd also like to thank me because I hired Jessica. And let me tell you a little bit about her. As the first Vision Zero policy director for the City of Milwaukee, Jessica is honored to be a part of a citywide effort to eliminate traffic fatalities and life-changing injuries by 2037. She started out as a bicycle ambassador and union organizer in Chicago and has since served as the deputy director of the Wisconsin Bike Fed, founded Milwaukee Walks, and oversaw the day-to-day operations and the long-range planning for the Oak Leaf Trail. Through collaboration and community involvement in transportation, she hopes to secure equity, health and safety, and climate resiliency for all. She lives in the River West with her son and a proud MPS parent. Let's give her a rip-roaring applause and welcome to the Rotary. Jessica.
Thank you. It's an honor to work with Preston and the City of Milwaukee. We're very lucky to have him and Mayor Johnson. So again, I'm Jessica Wineberg, Vision Zero Policy Director for the City of Milwaukee. I'm sad to say that we have such good timing for this talk. It shouldn't be that way. We shouldn't have these tragedies happening all the time. But it is a focus on eliminating death and injury that makes Vision Zero different. And I hope I can sell you all on the idea that we can all make some sacrifices to achieve that safety that we want to see. So what I'm going to talk about today, the outline, I'll give you an overview of what Vision Zero is, share some really key data that I think illuminates the problem in unique ways, share what the City of Milwaukee is doing, talk about our next steps, and then how you can get involved. So we really need everybody to be involved in Vision Zero, so please join us. I just want to start with saying that these traffic crashes are not accidents. Maybe if you leave with one thing, it's that you stop saying traffic accident. I hope it's 2 things. You never speed again and you don't say the word accident. But the easiest thing to do is not use that word anymore. So these are preventable. All the deaths that we have on our roadways are preventable. And they can be changed in numerous ways. The city's doing some. Individuals can take other actions. But we can eliminate these. And if you read the paper or you've ever come across a crash site like this, or there's someone in your family that you've lost, it's just a total tragedy. And yet on the other side, when we go to public meetings, people's main complaint is a parking spot moved, or there's a few more cars ahead of me. And especially this week, just that balance does not feel appropriate. But I think it's our job to really make that case for why we're willing to make some sacrifices for others and ourselves. So please know they're preventable. We don't want to use the word accident. An accident is something where you really had no control of it happening. But when people are speeding, they are making a choice that leads to these crashes, and that can change. So overall, Vision Zero is a new way of looking at traffic safety. We have stopped saying some of the old traditional approaches, and we're using new ideas and philosophies to approach this work. So one of the main things is that traffic deaths are preventable. Again, they're not accidents. Kind of in the old way of traffic engineering, you're like, this many people are going to die, but that's just a trade-off we're going to have. And we've decided we're not okay with that anymore. Humans are going to make mistakes. The only way for people to not die can't be that they behave perfectly all the time in every situation, because humans cannot behave perfectly all the time in every situation. I think like a good example maybe is when you go flying and there's a pilot and a co-pilot. Even the most highly trained pilot could have a heart attack or somehow not be able to fly, and you need a backup. And that's the kind of, even he can fail or they can fail, and we want to build that into the system. So how can we do that more thoroughly with traffic safety too? Our focus is on preventing fatal and severe crashes. We're not going to just look at the big number of fender benders. If you look at crash data, there's way more fender bender property only crashes than ones that kill or hurt people. But it's not as bad to have a fender bender as someone die. So we've decided to really zoom in on those crashes that cause human injury and then focus on our countermeasures to address those. Because you do different things to keep people from having a fender bender than to keep somebody alive. We also want to shy away from individual responsibility, just again thinking, if there's 44,000 people in America that were killed in traffic crashes last year, did every one of those individuals just make a mistake and, that was an accident and there's no trend there? No, there's something in the system that's driving those outcomes, and we're going to change the system. And then saving lives is not expensive. Yes, we will have to spend money to achieve this goal, but it is worth it, and in the long run, we will see so many economic and other benefits. Just briefly diving into like our model a little bit, that there's a lot of people who have a role to play in making our road safer. So we do have the system planners and policymakers, and it's our job to design a system that's safe. And we have to admit that we are failing if so many people are dying. And that's hard for all of us to do, but it's something really important, that it is our responsibility as those policymakers and planners. Individual road users do also have responsibilities to follow the rules, but again, we're not going to design the system only based on perfect rule following. And then there will be mistakes in the system, and we have to plan and design around those and not just keep calling, well, that mistake is an accident over and over and over again. A key thing in Vision Zero is to really focus in on speed. What's the big theme with all the traffic fatalities that we have? It is speed. How fast you go drastically impacts the effects if you hit anybody. It's especially true for people outside of cars. So when you're going 40 and if you hit a pedestrian, 73% of the time that person would have a severe life-changing injury or die. When we go down to 30 miles an hour, that drops to 40%. Okay, that's a lot better. More than half the people will survive or not have a serious injury. And then when we get down to 20, only 13% would have a fatality or serious injury. And so I think as a community, we really have to talk about, well, where should speed limits be set in communities that are dense and full of people, and there's parks and there's schools? Where on this slide should we be? And that's a big community conversation to talk about. I mean, following speed limits is one thing, but then also do we want to go farther and adjust our speed limits in some places? So I want to dive into some key data that's more local to Milwaukee, because I think we all live here and drive here and hopefully walk here too, and we think we know what the situation is, but anecdotes can only take us so far, although they can be very insightful. So I want to give some background data, hopefully to really influence any policy ideas or questions that you might have. So the Public Policy Forum just released a report last week that shows this picture of an absolute divergence of traffic fatalities between the state of Wisconsin and the city of Milwaukee. So the 71 counties that don't include Milwaukee have seen a 5% decrease in fatal and severe injuries. It's getting safer in every single other county. In our county, it's getting worse. Over 100% increase, and this is over a 20-year time horizon. So this is really alarming and it's really helpful. I hope this helps the DOT think about how they want to prioritize resources at the state level, and that maybe some programs that work in some places also might not work in Milwaukee County. What are other ways we can address this? I'd love to hear your ideas when we get to questions. I will also say, I think another key point here is that 22 years ago, why they went back that far is we had the same fatality rates. So there doesn't have to be this divergence. And in fact, urban places should be the most safe on a per population basis because we should have lower speeds and more different types of uses. So cities can be safe. They used to be safer than the rest of the state, and we can get there again. Now I just want to look at the City of Milwaukee traffic deaths a little bit. And the key points here obviously are that we've seen this terrible increase. I think it's important to note that pink line, which indicates that 2015 is really when we saw this big increase in our fatalities. So that predates the pandemic. The pandemic accelerated some of these trends, but they really were there before. And I think we need to do more research about what happened in 2015 that led to this. Some ideas that people have are cars got bigger, SUVs were much more common, and cell phone use is super ubiquitous at this point, so there's more distraction. Those are two really likely possibilities, but they haven't been proven yet. And nationally, the Vision Zero movement's really looking to get answers for that. Thank you. And your vocation was beautiful. And then the other thing that I see here is a lot of hope. Our lows used to be 35 people a year. So you can argue with me if you think we can get to 0 or not, but you can't argue with me that we can get down to 35, and we're around 88 as our average annual death rate now. So 35 is 100% possible. We were there a couple decades ago. We can do this again, and then we can just keep going down below those numbers. One thing that the City of Milwaukee has done in looking at this issue is just use data in general, but of course have that equity mindset. Like we saw, if we just look at the statewide trends, we might think everything's great here, but we have a different story here in Milwaukee when we separate the numbers. So we're working really hard to always be driven by data, be equity-centered. One tool that we made to help us with that work is a traffic violence dashboard, and I can send the link if I can still add it to the email. But this is an interactive dashboard where you can plot serious injuries, fatals, and you can look at any sort of geographic scale you would like to in the City of Milwaukee, look at different years, your census tract, things like that. And through this data, we've been able to develop the high injury network. So you might think this problem is huge, it's everywhere, how are we gonna spend our resources and tackle it? Well, one of the pieces of good news is that only 10% of our street miles have 58% of our serious crashes and fatalities. So we do know where to focus. And tools like this help us do that, and then will help the City of Milwaukee make very efficient investments into the future. When we talk about equity, and I highlight that Milwaukee has a different path than the state of Wisconsin, you might not be surprised to find that also white and black Milwaukeeans have a different story as far as their exposure to traffic violence and these risks. So this is also from the public policy report recently, that black Milwaukeeans are twice as likely to die from a pedestrian crash, or from an auto crash broadly, than white Milwaukeeans. And we have a bigger difference than some peer cities or peer counties. This was at the county level. But Marion, I think, is Indianapolis. Wayne County is Detroit. These are very appropriate places to compare to. So we have to really focus our efforts on bridging this divide. Another group that is overrepresented in our data is people who walk or bike. Basically, a car provides you with a lot of safety equipment and a metal cage that helps you better withstand a traffic crash. I'm sure this sounds super obvious, but it is really worth noticing or noting. So if a pedestrian is hit, 17% of the time, they will die. If a bicycle is hit, 6.7% of the time they will die. If a driver's hit, they have less than a 1% chance of dying. So this is why when we're with our data-driven approach, we need to focus on pedestrian safety and bicyclist safety. When we prevent those crashes, we're saving those lives. So that's an area we definitely focus on. I want to just give like kind of a summary then of some of this data that I know is really, really intense, and I'm going to give you hope too, don't worry. So African Americans and Latinos are most at risk to have negative issues from traffic crashes. Again, 10% of our streets have 58% of the serious injury and fatal crashes. And I will say that the City of Milwaukee is not the only owner of those streets. The Department of Transportation at the state level owns about 30% of those, and the county 10%. Again, people walking and biking are really at the most risk. And then here's the hopeful part. When we design a street for the safety of people biking and walking, it's safe for everybody. So we don't have to choose this person's safety over this person's. When we make the system slower, when we make it where a grandma can walk across the street to get groceries safely or pick up the kids from school, that is going to be good for everybody. So more on this idea that it is possible. We are not, this is an international movement. Sweden started it. Stockholm has reached 0 traffic deaths in most years recently, but it's also possible stateside. This is a picture of Hoboken, New Jersey, that has Vision Zero, but I mean, this is one of their before streets. It looks like Milwaukee, it's wide, it's open, people are gonna go too fast. So they were like us, and they redesigned their streets. This is one example of what they did. And they've had 0 traffic fatalities 7 years in a row. They are a smaller community than us. They were not, they had about, I think, 15 on average before that. So that's a different scale, but really it's possible. We can do this. And if you've been driving around the community or getting around the community, however you do, maybe you've seen this in Milwaukee too. So this is a before and after for Walnut, which is a street that's really showcasing how we can put safety into the center of our design. And yes, it slows people down, but that is the point, and it is a trade-off I hope we're all willing to make. I want to talk a little bit more about how we are achieving Vision Zero, and then we'll get to questions soon. There's a lot of strategic actions that we need to take to reach Vision Zero. We're going to build things differently. We're going to have protected bike lanes. We're focusing on lower speeds. We're doing community engagement. All of these things, and they're mutually reinforcing. A little bit more on how we're achieving this. So Streets for All is an overall concept. Again, that idea that once we design it to be safe for people walking and biking, it's safe for everyone. Look at this poor person in a wheelchair that has to just wait out in the street to cross. This isn't how it should be. We should make sure they have the sidewalk and curb cuts that they need to get where they're going. The picture, so this is about accessibility in a lot of ways. I don't think you can guess, but one person in that photo of bikers is blind and was doing a bike tour of the street to give us feedback from both the perspective of being a blind bicyclist and then as a pedestrian using a cane walking across the street, because we don't want him to feel like the street's so complicated to navigate with my cane, and that's the only way I can feel safe as a bicyclist. We wanted to, check in and see if we could achieve both those things. So if anybody figured it out, he was riding on the back of the tandem, but he is a competitor and one of the people that our transportation system really needs to serve and isn't currently. Streets for All can also mean all ages. We should live in a place where everybody can get where they're going safely, comfortably. Kids have freedom. Kids can go to their friends' houses. Older people can get the exercise that they want. And we can do this through Vision Zero. Streets for All can also be that we really rethink the entire public right-of-way. Do we want something to be a street that's for parking or through traffic, or do we want it to be a gathering place? Might that be what our community is missing? 6th Street is a really huge opportunity. We got a big federal grant to redesign the whole street. Right now, I think it, is still lightly used, even when every major theater and sports venue is active. There's still probably not a traffic jam on 6th. And guess what that means every other day of the year when there aren't that many events going on? It's a speedway. It's really hard for people to cross the whole street in time to catch the bus. And we want to have a better balance where people can get around regardless of their mode choice. Mayor Johnson has a really amazing goal of 50 miles of protected bike lane constructed or planned by 2026. And I will say this is one of the best ways to use the excess street capacity that we have. In Milwaukee, we have very wide right-of-ways, so many lanes, parking, maybe extra boulevard too. Is there a way that we can have safety be a bigger part of that? And protected bike lanes are a great way to make use of that excess space. I'm sure people have seen our bump outs. They do help control speeding, and that is the goal. But again, the fundamental issue of why we had to put a bump out somewhere is that there's excess capacity in the road. There's a lot of space for people to do things to speed. So when we take up the space, we can put a bump out there, or we could think about over time, if we can secure the funds, really redesigning the street to meet the current traffic demands. Community engagement is really important to us. We go out in the community in a lot of diverse ways, and art is a part of that as well. So we're working on an art car that's going to go to community events. This is a little Photoshop version of what we think it'll look like in the end. There's color changing cones on the top, and we'll drive to different community events and talk to people about their ideas and their issues with traffic safety, and really try to get them to join the bandwagon and see that it's worth going a little slower for all of this. And then we're doing a lot of action planning with various partners. We had a survey out that had over 1,000 respondents, 2 public information meetings with over 75 people, and lots of local community meetings where we got feedback on specific recommendations to see where we should be going in the future. So we're working on a Vision Zero plan, and that'll set our course for the next 12 years. The city got real active real quick and has done a lot of change, and now we're gonna think a little bit more long-term. What are we going to be doing to achieve Vision Zero based on community feedback? Here's an overview of the planning process. We can kind of skip this. The main idea just being that we've heard a lot of different things from the community even before Vision Zero was adopted. We knew there was an issue with traffic safety in our community, and people were giving us tons of ideas. We've been winnowing these down. They've gotten into some other plans. Now we're going back out to the community to see what you think about these ideas and what we should focus on in the future. And then we'll have a continuous improvement process at the end of that, really listening to the community, incorporating new ideas into our plan, and adapting and delivering on that plan as well. So next steps for Vision Zero include the launch of an anti-speeding campaign. I really was hoping to have some art to show with you today, but we're not quite there yet. But sometime this summer, we're going to have a big, multifaceted public service announcement campaign. We would love everybody to participate in amplifying the reach of that campaign. There will be a meeting with community partners to talk about how they can really get involved, and I hope that invitation can make its way to you all. We're doing ongoing community outreach, the art making and art car, like I mentioned. The plan is under draft right now. And then we're really exploring some newer ideas that haven't been fully a part of what we've been doing so far at Vision Zero, but are things we need to add. So how can technology help us solve this problem? That's a really big topic and something we need to think about. Is justice system reform important or part of the solution? How do we do that equitably? Yeah, that's what I'll say. And then, are there state or federal law changes that we would need to see? And this could be something like, right now you can get a 5-star rating for safety on a vehicle just based on how safe it keeps its occupants, with no consideration of what it might do to people outside of the car. And I don't know, I'm short, but I can walk in a parking lot these days and not see over the hood of every car. I mean, I'm an adult and I am shorter than the front of the truck. And that will really change the outcome that I have if I'm hit by a vehicle like that versus a sedan. Sounds terrible, but with a sedan, you're hit at the knees and you fall on the hood, which is actually designed to crumple and take some of the force, and you have much better outcomes. When you are just hit with a brick wall of a taller vehicle that's really straight, it's all internal injuries in your torso, which that's all your essential organs and your spine. So those are some of the things driving our injuries most likely. And can we work at the federal level to see if we can make some changes? We're not going to outlaw SUVs or anything like that, but can we make some changes around the edges at the very least? Okay, I hope everyone here will get involved in this work. We need your help. Show up at your community meetings, say that safer streets are important, but also just do the simple things of driving the speed limit and yielding to pedestrians. They have the right of way at every crosswalk, whether it's marked or unmarked. I'd love for you to participate in our anti-speeding campaign. Know that you can invite Vision Zero to your community, to your organization, to your business, to either table or teach a class. We want to get the word out and talk about these issues in different ways. And then I stole from Ezra Klein, ending with a few reading recommendations. So here's 2 really good books if you're interested in this topic. But it is open for questions now, and I really welcome your thoughts.
Thank you, Jessica. If you have a question for Jessica, you may use this microphone here. And as always, please keep your questions concise and topical.
I'll try. You mentioned 2015, and while you were talking, I went back and just quickly looked at traffic enforcement back at that time. And I know you're not from the police, but I'd be curious how you interface with the enforcement component. I think in 2011, there were 100,000 traffic citations issued by MPD. 2015, there were half that. Last year, there were half that again. And so how do you, through the mayor's office, work with the police to really look at that part of the problem, which one would think is not coincidental?
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And I don't know, I can't remember if exactly your data is, year by year correct, but she's completely right on the trend line and the theme. That is a fact that we are seeing way less enforcement. And this is something we have to work out as a community and with the police. What is the role of policing in our society today? And if we don't think traffic enforcement is a central part of their work, there are other ways we can do it. Automated enforcement systems with cameras have been really effective in other communities. In Albuquerque, they've seen over a 30% decrease in fatalities in 1 year with just 20 cameras, and they're a similar size to us. So there are other ideas out there where we can have equity and enforcement at the same time. I will say the police with Act 12 have less public oversight than in the past. And it's really important for you as community members to share, what you want their priorities to be and how they can do it. They have been facing staff shortages and have been focused on priority 1 calls, especially through the pandemic. But they have not returned to traffic enforcement in the way that people might want to see, and we have these issues. But they don't report to me. They are part of this process, and we're trying to make the case to focus on additional enforcement with equity considerations as well. But it is a little bit tough going, and I welcome everybody to talk to your alderman or talk to the police about what you think their role should be in society, and we have to really listen to everybody in that conversation.
Hi, about 15, 20 years ago or so, MPS eliminated driver's ed from the high school classes as a money-saving effort. And I've just seen, just right along with it, driving has gotten worse. And so right now, most students in the city of Milwaukee, learning to drive is a luxury. And I had a young man living with us in our household who couldn't afford to get driver's ed, and he learned to drive for my daughters. How crazy is that? So is there any way that we can reverse that whole thing?
Yeah, the good news is there's a lot of good news there. So we have reversed that in large part. And I will say, I don't think it was an MPS decision to stop funding driver's ed. I believe the state decided they weren't going to fund it at the school level. But needless to say, we didn't have accessible driver's ed for a while. Governor Evers just did sign this fall a bill that will provide free driver's ed to students on free and reduced lunch statewide. That's fabulous. That's a real win. And then also MPS has been filling the gap really well. They've been offering driver's ed with pandemic-related dollars for $35 per student, and that $35 is actually the cost of the permit that goes to the DOT at the end of the program. So if essentially your education is free, but you still have to pay for the permit at the end. So they've been doing a fabulous job with that, but we do need to make sure we have appropriate driver's ed. And I think there's an idea also that perhaps driver's ed shouldn't be the only way that the public invests in transportation education. it should really be the capstone of transportation education, not the only thing. So how about we start with pedestrian education of first and second graders, bicycle education for fifth and sixth graders, how to ride the bus to a field trip or to a friend's house for seventh and eighth graders, and have that ladder of education. And of course, driving is a privilege and can be part of that mix, but perhaps it should not be the only thing that we offer as a society.
Congratulations on all the efforts that you're doing, and it's what a task. And your data-driven approach. It says in business, that culture eats strategy for lunch, and the norms that are the seedbed of culture are troublesome if we don't have value human life or the risks that we impose on others. So I'd be curious as to what thoughts you have on, given your data-driven approach, the qualitative data about the culture that we have, or other cities have for that matter, that lead to the fatalities that you're concerned about.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. One thing along those lines, I think we see the absolute most egregious sorts of traffic crashes, and normally I'm much more positive and energized, but like this has been a really hard week. And so there are these absolutely insane crashes where someone's going 80 or someone tries to kill their girlfriend's daughter. I mean, these things are terrible. And they are part of my job, and we can fix them as a community. I do believe that, but also that's not the predominant sort of crashes that are hurting people. So I don't want us to leave this room ever thinking like, as long as I'm not super reckless like those other people, I'll never kill someone. Like looking at that chart, even just going 40, which is the speed limit on a lot of streets, but even going 40 can really kill people. And when we look at the data, that is the more common way for someone to die is that they got hit by someone going 40, not by they got hit by someone going 70 or 80. And so when we talk about that culture, I don't want us to overemphasize an outlier as the central part of our culture. We do speed, but it's not that it's only those other people that are causing this problem. I hope that kind of gets at what you're saying.
TJ Molinari, thank you for all your work on driving this initiative. I just wanted to throw this out there for fellow Rotarians, a great essay from the New York Times. We're taking New York City's streets back, and then we're coming for the rest of the country. It is not about riots. It's September 2nd, 2023. It's really a great piece on this topic. And just the question that I'd like to offer up, and just a little context, we live on a residential street in the city of Milwaukee where the speed limit is 25. What do you think the appetite is for a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit on residential streets? Is that realistic? If so, what can we do to push for that? Who do we need to contact? How do we approach that?
Let's poll the room. Who wants 15-mile-an-hour speed limit on their residential street? What do you think? Is that that was a rough half? I don't know, 40%, 30%? I don't know. I couldn't really count fast enough. But I think that's the snapshot. I do think neighbors have been banding together to install speed humps, and that basically makes the speed limit effectively 15 on your street when you do that. So we've done hundreds and hundreds of those across the city. So people like that in front of their house, but then they want to be able to go much faster everywhere else. And we need to figure out how to achieve both.
My question is whether you have any more plans to redo streets such as you have done Edgewood north of the UWM campus, where you have one lane and two bike lanes. I bicycle that quite frequently, and when two cars are going opposite directions in the street, it's extremely scary and I think rather dangerous. So I'm wondering if you've had any feedback on this and if you've got any thoughts about perhaps doing things a different way. Thank you.
Yeah, Edgewood is an interesting case if people want to take a look. It has what's called advisory bike lanes, and basically this is a location that it's just a residential. Any residential street operates the same way as Edgewood right now, where you can kind of squeeze two cars going in both directions, and bikers can be on the side. But we've actually striped what this looks like, so it might feel confusing, but really it's how you operate on any narrower residential street already. We don't have major plans to roll those out. They're kind of just used when there's key connections and you want to make it really clear to bicyclists that this is a great way to get from the lake to the Oak Leaf Trail, for example, in that river park. So that is not a major part of our strategy for road redesign moving forward. We want to, there aren't a lot of crashes on Edgewood and streets like that. So then we're it's rare where we'll invest too many resources to try to fix them. And we've heard both sides of issues with Edgewood. It's good, it's bad. So we're thinking about that. Yeah.
Hi, I'm John Frankie. The last thing I'd like to see in our world is more surveillance cameras. But the fact is there are public and private cameras everywhere. I discovered recently buses have cameras taking pictures of everything that's going on around them. So the question is there discussion about using poll cameras, video cameras to monitor traffic and prosecute clear violations? And if not, why not?
Yes. Okay, so for traffic enforcement cameras, we're prohibited at the state level to be able to have those in Milwaukee. We have had it on our legislative agenda for over 20 years to at least have a pilot in Milwaukee to test it out, see if it can work for us, see if we can drive down crashes. The police do have some cameras out in the community, and they have been incredibly useful for solving crimes like the killing of the 4-year-old girl. They knew right away what car they were looking for, had a license plate, things like that. Also from store cameras. I don't actually know where the footage came from in that situation. It could have been from businesses alongside. So it is definitely helping us react to crashes. But from a Vision Zero perspective, we want to work on that prevention side. So then it raises different questions, like you said. And we are not able to surveil traffic at this point. But would look to change the law so that we could issue tickets on a kind of automatic basis on the parameters we as a community set.
Can you speak to cell phone usage and these crashes?
Yeah, you can actually set up these newer camera systems. You could have them work on, if there's hands use of a cell phone, they could capture that and send tickets. It's kind of crazy. The things that, if we had cameras, what we could choose to do, we would definitely want to have a community-led body help decide what sorts of things we're doing. And from a safety perspective, red light running and speeding would be the focuses of what we want to do. But it's just interesting. There's more and more technology out there to possibly help these things. The data on distracted driving is terrible. It's really hard to know if someone was distracted. There's lots of distraction besides their phone. It's hard to know if they were using their phone. So unless it's a fatality and then there's an investigation where we look in to see if someone had an active phone kind of in that situation, we really don't know. So there's some numbers in the crash stats, but I don't think they're that helpful because I've talked to police and they will just say, I can only check the distracted box if I saw exactly how that person was distracted. And in so many of the cases, you can't. So it's a big issue, but we really don't know how big at this point.
Thanks again, Jessica. So I have auto insurance. My family has auto insurance that has now an incentive app that basically tracks your usage, tracks your phone usage. I've actually found that just mentally that I've actually used my phone less while driving, just so it's actually somewhat working. My question for you is, given that insurance companies have a lot of at stake within this conversation, are they a part of Vision Zero, or is there any plan to try and bring them in?
Yeah, that's a good question. There is a representative from a statewide insurance education group that's a big part of the Coalition for Safer Driving, a grassroots effort that helped argue for Vision Zero and continues to support it. And they've been a great supporter. Yeah, I think there's a lot more unique partnerships like that we can develop. And I do think a big question, and maybe, if you're a business person, think about what's the positive incentive we can provide for people to do the right thing, that we can have that nudge going the right way. There's so much in our culture saying, go fast, you're late, you have so much scheduled. But what about like the opposite of like, no, it's good to take your time, help someone out. Can you get a financial reward for that sort of behavior? I really, would appreciate people's thoughts on how do we change it from being a negative to being a positive, where you get rewarded for doing the right behavior. And I think insurance pricing is a really good opportunity for that.
Thank you, Jessica.